Today's tale comes from the road, and it's about attention. And once you know it, the safest thing you can do is keep moving. Unless you too want to discover why, it's kinder if you don't struggle.
Tarl Brown had meant to be over the ridge before dusk, but the road had become soft under the cartwheels, and his mule had developed an opinion about every puddle. By the time he saw the fire, the light was dim, and distances were difficult to measure. The little camp sat in a coppice close to the track, and Tarl slowed down to listen. He heard a pot lid rattle, and then a man coughing. There were no raised voices or laughter. He guided the mule down, stopping just far enough away to avoid looking like he was there for sinister reasons. The old man by the fire looked up. He was wrapped in a patched coat with a hood that had lost its shape, and sat with his hands held out to the warmth. A second shape sat a little back, but Tarl could not make out a face there. "You're welcome to the edge of it," the old man said. His voice was rough. "If you keep your wheels off my toes." "I'll keep my wheels off anything that matters," Tarl replied, and got a smile in return. He crouched, palms out toward the heat, and felt his fingers thaw. Then he noticed the stones. They were not the neat hearthstones people stacked to keep their fires from spreading. 3 uprights, each no higher than a man's chest, sat in a loose line just beyond the flames. They looked ancient and stubborn. Tarl examined them from where he was seated, and the old man saw him. "Don't put your bed near those," he said. Tarl chuckled. "They're rocks." "So are gravestones," the old man replied. "You wouldn't bed down next to one of those." The voice from the darker edge of the camp stirred. "He says that to everyone." The old man ignored it. "He asked with his eyes," he muttered. "I answered." Tarl rubbed his hands together. "Name?" "Pethwick," the old man said. He lifted a tin cup, sniffed at whatever was in it, grimaced and drank anyway. "And you?" "Tarl." Pethwick nodded. "You're not a man who wants stories?" he asked. Tarl shook his head. "I want sleep." "Stories can help you sleep, Tarl," Pethwick replied. "Help you dream, too." The other traveller, whoever he was, chuckled and leaned forward enough for Tarl to see a wide mouth and a bandaged knuckle. "Tell him the one about the stump," he said. "He's been staring at the stones like he thinks they're going to stand and march." Tarl shook his head again. "I'm fine without, friend." Pethwick's eyes had returned to the fire. "You're never fine without," he said. Then he sighed. "All right. If you're going to sleep in the same spot as those, you may as well know why your bones are uneasy." He did not launch into it with flair. He spoke like a man recalling the weather. "It was a year of early frost," he said. "The kind that makes the ground look solid when it isn't. I was running goods inland, cloth and salt and needles, the usual little lies you put in people's hands to make them feel less poor. 3 men walked with me for safety, the sort who believed safety was made of noise and numbers." The bandaged knuckle laughed. "That's most men, Pethwick." "We came upon standing stones near a copse," Pethwick went on. "Not grand ones, no carvings you could boast about, just 3 uprights in a line with moss clinging to them. I told them we'd go on, but they decided we were tired and that men can't be scared of rocks." Tal watched Pethwick's hands. They were still held toward the warmth, but the fingers had curled slightly. "One of them pissed at the base of one of the stones," Pethwick said. "He laughed while he did it. The moment it hit the earth, the fire did something strange. It bent. The flames leaned toward the stones." There was silence in the coppice now, with all ears on Pethwick. Even the owls and the moths seemed to be listening. "So we slept," he said. "Sometime in the night I heard a sound like nails dragged along wood. I told myself it was branches, and then a few other things you tell yourself to keep the dark simple." He paused. "When I opened my eyes, the lad who'd pissed at the stone was sitting upright, facing it. His back was straight as a post, and he wasn't blinking. A dim light at the base of each stone was glowing." Tal cut in. "Did you speak to him?" "I said his name," Pethwick replied. He didn't answer. Then he spoke, and it wasn't his voice. It said, "It's kinder if you don't struggle." Tal felt frightened now, and the bandaged knuckle man fidgeted nervously. "That's your favourite line, isn't it, Pethwick?" he said, trying for humour. "The lad stood," Pethwick continued, "and he walked toward the stones like he'd been called to them. We grabbed him, and he fought us, like something in him was desperate to be closer to them. He turned his head and smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was something else, unnatural-like." Tal stared at the fire and tried to think of the morning, that Pethwick's yarn had pulled him in, and he was already wondering what might be lurking in the dark around them. "What happened?" he asked. Pethwick breathed out heavily. "Nothing dramatic," he said. "The stones didn't topple, the earth didn't open like a mouth. The glow at their bases brightened further, and the lad, he collapsed, shaking, teeth chattering, and the glow dimmed again." Tal's hands felt cold again now. "You left?" "I left," Pethwick answered. "I didn't go deeper. I saw something else, through the trees, and I didn't need to go closer to know it was wrong." "The stump," the bandaged knuckleman whispered, eager despite himself. Pethwick stared into the dark. "A stump taller than 3 men," he said, "hacked at the top like it had been butchered, ringed by stones like fences, and at their bases that same pale light." He fell quiet, and Tal did not move, thinking it might draw attention. When he finally lay down, he put his bedroll as far from the stones as the coppice allowed, telling himself a dozen things that made it the sensible choice. At dawn he found Pethwick already packing. "You going on?" Tal asked, willing the answer to be no. Pethwick tied a strap. "Always on," he said, before turning to the stones. "Just remember what I told you, Tal. Don't camp near standing stones." Pethwick nodded, and then he was gone up the track. Tal hitched his mule and moved out, and when the road later passed a line of boundary stones, half sunk beside a field, he gave them a far wider berth. Clara Langdon's work did not permit superstition. She marked boundaries, inspected timber, and settled arguments that began with a farmer's finger stabbing at a map and ended with a fist. She knew how land held memory, how paths moved over time, and how rivers stole the ground in small bites. She definitely did not believe in stones that moved of their own accord. She met Pethwick on a road that curved through woodland on her patch. She had walked out to check a marker near an old track, because a man had sworn the line was wrong. though she was accustomed to men swearing it when they wanted more than their share. By late afternoon she saw a small fire in a dip, and beyond it 4 old standing stones. But something was wrong. Those stones were not where they should have been. Pethwick sat close to a fire, warming his hands, and he looked up at Clara with a kind of weary recognition. "You're measuring," he said. "I know a forester when I see one. Don't often see a woman in the vert, though." "I'm confirming, sir," Clara replied, and looked to the stones. The glow at their bases was barely visible. The restless traveller tried to laugh. "It's just old rock," he said. Pethwick did not look at him. "Pack," he muttered, and the man's laugh died. Pethwick's eyes stayed on Clara. "You know them." "I know where they were last year," Clara said, "and I know they should not be here." Pethwick nodded. "They drift," he said. Clara made a noise. "Old stones don't drift." "Everything drifts if the ground beneath decides it ought," Pethwick replied. She moved closer to the fire so she could see him better. Up close he looked older and more weathered than he had from the road. "What are you doing here?" Clara asked. "Not sleeping," Pethwick said. He nodded toward the stones. "Not with those so close." The restless traveller piped up. "We were only stopping to eat," he said, and Clara sensed a plea in it. "Then eat and go," she snapped, and then, pulling back a little, she quietly added, "before the light goes." The man fumbled with his pack, glad to have an excuse. Pethwick's eyes followed him for a moment, then returned to Clara. "You've heard my name?" he said. Clara hesitated. "Pethwick, isn't it?" she replied. "You tell a different story on every road I hear." "I tell the same story," he said. "It's the road that changes it." Clara could have turned away, walked to her marker, done her work and returned before dark. But the stones behind the fire seemed to draw her in, and she found herself sitting on the edge of a fallen log. "Tell it then," she said. Pethwick stared into the flames, searching for the right version to fit this moment. When he spoke, his voice was less performative, intuitively knowing she would not tolerate too much embellishment. "There was a stump," he began. Clara kept her face still. "Yes, they say you always start there." Pethwick nodded. "Because it's always there," he said. "Not on the map, never in the same place twice, but it's always there if you go far enough where the trees grow old and close." His face darkened. "We found the ring," he said. "More stones than 3. Broken because the ground didn't want a perfect circle. The bases glowed faint, and the stump sat inside like a thing held down." Clara watched him closely. "Held down?" Pethwick's eyes lifted to hers. "Held in," he said. Pethwick's voice stayed calm. "His palm took the pattern," he said. "Lines rose under his skin like black veins that didn't belong." He laughed at first, but then he shook his hand, trying to throw it off, but he couldn't. The restless traveller made a small sound and looked away. "That night," Pethwick said, "we camped too close. Not in the ring. We weren't fools. But the forest went quiet anyway, and then the voice began." Clara gripped her knees. "From where?" "From below," Pethwick replied. "From the place the stones were anchored into. It spoke names, one word at a time. Each time it spoke, the glow at the bases brightened." Clara could almost smell damp earth, leaves and fungus. "One man ran," Pethwick said, "straight out, thinking that fleeing would make him safe. He reached the tree line, and the ground took him." Clara didn't want to ask, but forced the question out. How? Pethwick's eyes did not leave the fire. Roots rose up and coiled tight around his ankles, and he screamed. We grabbed him, but his skin just slid from our fingers. The ground took him like a mouth takes food. It just swallowed him. Clara felt panic. But you managed to pull him free. We tried, Pethwick said, and there was shame in his voice. We tried until our hands bled. And then the voice spoke his name again. The glow dimmed, and he was gone. Just gone. The restless traveller had backed away, and Clara was now staring at the bases of the stones behind the fire. "And the man who touched the stone?" she asked. Pethwick smiled. "He lived," he said. "The patterns stayed under his skin. Sometimes, when we camped too close to any standing stones after that, he would sit up in the night and say, 'It's kinder if you don't struggle,' though he never woke." Clara shivered. "You embellish," she said, though she did not believe he was lying. She needed something to push back against. Pethwick nodded, taking no offence. "Of course I do," he said. "I'm old. I've told it too many times. So yes, the details slide a little, but my dread always stays." The restless traveller found his voice. "We should go," he said. Clara waited, keen to ask questions, but decided against it. "Go," she told the traveller, and then to Pethwick, "Don't sleep here." Pethwick looked at the stones. "I won't," he said. "Not again." As they moved away, Clara glanced back. The stones stood there, dumb and weathered. Did their bases glow? She could not see for sure, and so headed back to her marker. Standing stones were everywhere in those parts, but now she was more aware of how far she was from the nearest, and corrected her movements. She told herself it was caution, not obedience. Somewhere Pethwick chuckled to himself. John Hawthorne had lived long enough in the cracks between people to know what belief cost. He had believed in a father, and it had cost him bruises. He had believed in a lover, and it had cost him pride. He had believed in his own luck, and it had cost him a winter half-starved. Now he was walking alone on a road that ran north when he found Pethwick's fire. He had intended to pass on, but the smell of hot soup reached him, and while his caution said, "Move on," his hunger advised him to follow his nose. He stepped into the camp. "Evening," he said. Pethwick looked up, not especially surprised to see John approaching. The road had been delivering men to him all season, and he had stopped wondering why. "Evening," Pethwick replied. "Sit if you're sitting. Don't hover waiting judgment. We'll know you soon enough, stranger." John grinned and crouched by the warmth. The first thing he noticed was the stones. 5 of them in a loose ring, broken and half buried. At their bases a faint glow? He couldn't tell. Pethwick watched him. "Don't camp near standing stones," he said. "Not if you want dreams that belong to you." John laughed nervously. "I don't own much," he said. "Surely I can keep my dreams." "You own your name," Pethwick replied. "Even that's enough for some things to want it." "Who are you?" John asked. "Pethwick," the old man replied. "You?" "John." Pethwick lifted the pot lid, ladled broth into a tin cup, and handed it across. "Welcome, John. Eat." So John ate. The broth was thin but hot, and at least stopped him from trembling with the cold. For a while they sat with only the small noises of fire and spoons, and John tried not to look at the stones, but ultimately failed. After a moment's scrutiny, he turned back to the fire and his eyes met Pethwick's. Pethwick nodded. "I've told it different ways," he said. "Folk think that means it isn't true. But I won't sleep near them." John's mouth was full, and he swallowed. "What, the stones? And is it?" he asked, trying for scorn and finding only curiosity. Pethwick stared into the flames. "It's true like hunger is true," he said. "You feel it." John should have stood right then, thanked him, and walked on to find his own ditch to sleep in. But the night was cold, and the fire was warm, so he stayed, despite the stones. "Tell me then," he said. "Tell me why you won't sleep near them." Pethwick's eyes lifted, and John saw fatigue in them. "All right," he said, "but when you hear it, don't go trying to be useful. Don't go hunting where you shouldn't." He began. "We came upon the ring, stones around a stump hacked up at the top and blackened like an old hearth. The air smelled foul, and the forest was too quiet. It was listening." John wanted to ask how big, where and when, but he sensed those questions were the wrong ones. "We camped too close," Pethwick said, "because men prefer being near what frightens them for some foolish reason." In the night, the glow at their bases brightened, and the voice began to speak. John's hands curled around his cup. "The voice?" Pethwick nodded. "From below," he said, "from the place where the stones were anchored. It spoke names, and each time it did so, the glow brightened." John was now hooked in. "Whose names?" "Ours," Pethwick said. "And then, names that didn't belong to anyone there. Mothers, fathers, lovers, names that had no business in a clearing, names that meant it wasn't just counting bodies." John's stomach turned, and he tasted the broth again. "One of my men stood up," Pethwick said, "like a man answering a call. He walked toward the stones. We grabbed him, and he fought us with a strength that didn't belong to him, then spoke words." John's lips parted. The phrase came before Pethwick even said it. "It's kinder if you don't struggle," Pethwick said. John's skin prickled, and his heart began to pound. "The glow brightened," Pethwick continued, "and the man's skin began to change. Not all at once, slow, like frost creeping across a pond. Lines rose under his flesh. The stone's pattern was being pushed out of him from inside. His teeth loosened and began to fall out. He was spitting blood, and it sounded like he was drowning." John gagged, but swallowed it down. The fire snapped, and he jumped. "And the figures," Pethwick said. "There were figures beyond the light, tall shapes in the darkness. They didn't come closer or attack. They just watched." John's voice came out raw. "Did you kill him?" Pethwick shook his head. "You can't kill what's already being taken like that," he said. "The stones intervened, but not to save him. The glowing flared. He collapsed, twitching, and the glowing dimmed again, satisfied." John stared at the stones, fully expecting to see the glow brighten. Pethwick continued. "In the morning," he said, "he didn't remember his name. He remembered the name the voice had given him, and he would not speak anything else. He followed the stones wherever they appeared, like a dog following a scent." John shuddered. "And you?" he whispered. "What did it do to you?" Pethwick looked down at his hands. "It made me keep moving," he said. "Moving feels like hiding, and hiding feels like safety. But safety is not the same as being unnoticed, John. Oh no." John gasped. "You're afraid it will notice you again?" Pethwick lifted his eyes. "It already did," he said. "That's the truth that doesn't change, no matter how I tell it." John sat very still. He felt in the air around the ring the same pressure he had felt in alleys when a man watched him from a doorway, and he couldn't see the man's face, only the intent. He believed Pethwick because his body recognized that kind of dread. He stood abruptly, and his cup fell, clattering against stones in the dirt. Pethwick did not move to stop him. He only said, "Don't camp near standing stones." "I won't," John said, and knew it was not a promise. It was a law he had accepted. John walked away and did not stop until the firelight was gone behind him. When he finally lay down under bare branches, he did it in the open, where no stones were visible. He did not sleep, though. Each time his eyelids drooped, he saw the ring of stones and heard the mysterious voice. In the days that followed, he kept moving. He avoided stones and chose uncomfortable camps because it just felt safer. 3 months later, in a market town, John heard Pethwick's name again, spoken by a woman selling onions. "Old trader," she said to a customer, "came in last night and took a room above the cobbler. Said he was done with the road. Didn't last." John spoke. "Didn't last," he echoed, and the woman glanced at him, annoyed at being interrupted. "Died," she said, "unseen, like a candle. They found him on the bed with his hands folded, but his teeth were missing, and his veins were up, all black-like." John stood up, and the market noise was suddenly far away. He imagined Pethwick making the choice to stop and let walls replace hedgerows and fire replace road. He thought of the stones somewhere out there, half buried, their bases faintly glowing. He remembered what Pethwick had said, that moving felt like hiding, and hiding felt like safety, and he understood then the consequence of choosing the opposite. He left the onion stall without buying. As he walked out of the town, he found himself scanning the verge, but not for bandits and not for dogs, for anything upright and old. He came upon a single boundary stone, no higher than his knee, worn blunt by the years. It should have meant nothing, yet at its base, in the shadow where earth met rock, he swore he saw the faintest, pale glow. John did not go close enough to be sure. He went around it as wide as the ditch allowed, heart hammering, and as he passed, he heard the softest possible whisper. "It's kinder if you don't struggle."
In the marchland, some boundaries exist to keep things in, not to keep you safe. If you are noticed crossing them, then beware. Struggling only makes you easier to claim.